Yes, this is I, Kenneth the K-Rock Cline, coming to you with a surprising 10th episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock. And boy, oh boy, I am really looking forward to this one. Now, folks, I gotta tell you what, I've always enjoyed doing this, or I like doing this kind of podcast. You can listen to my podcast on Podbean or Spotify or on my YouTube channel at KWC Cline 91, and that is where you guys will be able to locate it on the YouTube channel as well. So, but let's get down to really serious business here. Now, folks, I had just finished my 9th episode of this podcast, and on this episode, we were going to be talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, who they were going to open their schedule with, were they actually going to be in Kansas City in the near future, and also an NFL scheduling controversy that could have potential implications for two franchises, although, to be honest, I don't think it would be as severe, but they probably should have thought ahead of time and maybe see if they can work out some kinks and find a loophole to a controversy over the international location that they're going to be playing at. But I had just finished doing my 9th episode, and I had just posted it on Podbean and YouTube, when all of a sudden I was reminded of some comments that were made by a former, well, I don't know if you would call him a former NBA player, but I know he's not playing in the NBA right now. He hasn't really been signed by anybody. I guess we'll call him a free agent, just to be sure. A free agent NBA player who made some comments regarding NBA and NFL players. And when I saw these comments, which I'll get to talking about in just a moment, when I saw these comments, I said to myself, darn, I cannot believe that my co-host, Mark T. Robinson, and I aren't doing a podcast on this, because we would be all over this right here, right now. But obviously, we're both busy with some schedules, and since I've kind of started branching out to doing a solo podcast of my own, I have a little more opportunities to talk about things that we probably wouldn't be talking about on the other show. And since I saw those comments by Austin Rivers, I said to myself, that's it. We're talking about it right now. So, folks, I got a little special treat for you. You are getting a 2-for-1 deal. You're getting 2 episodes in one day, and this is the 2nd episode on this day. So, folks, since I'm a generous guy, I hope you guys enjoy this episode, because today we're going to be talking about Austin Rivers. We're going to be talking about the comments he made. We're going to be talking about the backlash he has received and some criticisms. And also, for a fun treat, since we're talking about NBA and the NFL in this particular podcast, I'm going to be coming up with a starting 5 of NFL players that could play in the NBA, and I'm also going to be coming up with a starting 7 of NFL players or NBA players that'll be coming to the NFL. I'm only going to do 7-on-7 type situations because there's so many positions in the NFL that it's hard to name all the players that currently play in the NBA that would be good fits for the NFL. But anywho, this is my podcast. This is Krocking, Locking, and Dropping, episode number 10 with the K-Rock. And folks, you can listen to this podcast more on Podbean, Spotify, and of course my YouTube channel, KWC91. And folks, we're going to step aside real fast, but when we come back, let's get into the comments that Mr. Austin Rivers made. Austin Rivers, who is a former NBA player, or, well, he hasn't quite retired from the game of basketball yet, though he isn't playing with anybody. Let's just call him a free agent for now. So Austin Rivers, currently a free agent in the NBA, maybe potentially with another contract in the future, was on the Pat McAfee show, and they were just talking about some interesting things, and I guess the conversation involved the deal with basketball and all that, and this is where Austin Rivers made his comments. He basically said that he could take 30 players right now in the NBA and throw them in the NFL. And the same thing couldn't happen if you took the 30 players from the NFL and put them in the NBA. And that has caused a lot of interesting comments, some backlash, some controversies, because right now we are talking about a debate between the NFL and the NBA. Can NFL players succeed in the NBA? And can NBA players succeed in the NFL? Now, J.J. Watt had a quote response to that. He quote tweeted an article that featured the comments, and he said, "You don't got a job in either right now." He was referring to Austin Rivers, but he said, "You don't got a job in either right now. Go ahead and try it." He then later replied to his own comment saying, "I don't play in the NBA. 6 fouls is all I could give you, and that will be it. Call it a day." So J.J. Watt is clearly saying that there is no way NBA players can translate into the NFL. But then you have other people that are making comments suggesting that it is possible for players to make it, or NFL players. And he said, literally, "You don't got a job in either right now. Go ahead and try it." Chris Long, who has a similar trait with Austin Rivers in that he has a famous father who played in the professional sport that he would wind up playing and was also a 2-time Super Bowl champion, went on his podcast declaring that he has an emergency Austin Rivers rant after he heard this. He basically said that NBA players are so too spoiled and would struggle with making the switch. Basically, he said, "We had 3 massage therapists for a team of 53. Y'all would lose your bleeping minds, dude." Then he talked about how it's basically how you practice or what relationships you have with your coaches and teammates and how much load management are you getting. Because trust me, there is a lack of load management in the NFL, and that is something NBA players would struggle to get themselves familiar with. One of my favorite comments and criticisms of Austin Rivers' comments was from Emmanuel Acho, who of course is now an FS1 sports analyst talking on the TV show of Speak, who also himself played football in the NFL. This is what he had to say, and I got to tell you what, I was really impressed when I heard him say this.
"If you hear nothing else, hear this. Football drills make basketball players, not the other way around. Who's the most intimidating player in the NBA right now? Maybe Draymond Green? Have you met Trent Williams, 6'4", 320 pounds? You get a screen in basketball, you end up falling to the floor. Imagine going across the middle, Fred Warner waiting on you, Roquan Smith waiting on you. I'm not even going to mention the names of old like Ray Lewis. What's the most physical drill in basketball practice? Maybe a 2-on-2 rebounding drill. The coach, he throws the ball at the glass. You got 2 offensive players, 2 defensive players. They got to box each other out, go get the board. Have you ever seen Oklahoma drill? You're lying on your back. Coach blows a whistle. You get up. Ball carrier got the ball. You got to make a tackle 10 yards apart. Collision. Football, you have a license to kill, a license to injure, a license to destroy. Basketball, Jamal Murray threw a heating pack on the court and everybody crying for suspensions. You think NBA players could play in the NFL? Think again.
That is scary, and I would be wise to not take up his advice and go play in the NBA or go play in the NFL for that matter. But yeah, you kind of see where all this is going. There's definitely been a lot of comments and a lot of criticism from Austin Rivers' comments about him picking 30 players from the NBA to go play in the NFL. Look, I tried playing football when I was in middle school. I tried doing it when, I just wanted to be cool and everything. I thought I could do it. I couldn't do it. I mean, I only lasted a few practices before I decided that, this wasn't for me. There are a lot of people in this world that try football thinking it's so easy. All you do is just throw the ball downfield and you make a catch and you try to run for some yards. You're trying to go that way. But listen, there's a lot of things in football that make it so different from the NBA. Now look, in football you have your different plays. Obviously, just like you do in basketball, you have your X's and O's, what play you're going to run, what screens are you going to set and everything. But in football, the wordage is so different. It is so difficult. You hear on the basketball court players saying, Linda, 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 or back screen, or box out, But in football, it's like, Omaha, Omaha, one gun, two shoe, or, you got to come up with these ridiculous play calling names, like 896 F flat, or 42 X curl up, or whatever, and then there's like longer terminology for these plays. You think an NBA player is going to know that while they're playing on a basketball court in a game that is continued in motion? Like football, you have, an average, you might have 5 or 10 seconds per play. In basketball, you have to keep going. It is business. You think if a point guard is going to yell out all these things on the court at that moment, does he have enough time? He might waste about 5 seconds. 5 seconds on a 24-second shot clock, meaning you have 19 seconds to get a shot off before the buzzer goes off. It is absolutely crazy that you would think that football players or NBA players can make it into football. But let's talk about something real important here. There is a lot more issues on the football field that differ in basketball. Football players wear pads. There are a lot of injuries that happen in football. Yes, there are injuries in basketball, some of them severe, but in football, you are bruised up, you get banged up, you might have a knee injury, you might twist your ankle and everything, and the contact is harder because in basketball, if you tackle someone, guess what? You're going to get a flagrant foul and you're suspended. If you tackle someone in football, then all you do is just stop a play. There's nothing wrong, unless, of course, it's a horse collar tackle, or it's a tackle below the waist, or you're targeting someone and hit them in the helmet. There are penalties to that. But that is so hard. You cannot do all those things in a football field, even when you have pads on, because you have to play a game of football with pads on. You don't have that luxury. You don't have that in basketball. In basketball, you can play freely. But it's almost, I'm not saying, like, football pads are a difficult thing to accustom to. I can't see anybody on a basketball court shooting a three-pointer with the football pads and a helmet on. I can't see, a football player trying to block a guy that's coming right at him stronger than they are without injuring themselves or tearing a forearm or going down because they're not wearing pads and everything. Or you're going to have contact. You're going to have head-to-head injuries if you don't have helmet on. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, I think there are a few guys that could play in the NFL from the NBA, and I'll get to those in my next segment. But the thing that really is troubling me is the transition. And I know there have been cases where basketball players have transitioned into the NFL and vice versa. Charlie Ward was a quarterback from Florida State University. He won the Heisman Trophy in 1993. However, he wasn't drafted into the NFL. One of the reasons, of course, was the fact that he was a two-sport athlete who also played basketball. But the other reason was he was not a typical quarterback in those days. He was one of those mobile rushing quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson is, or Robert Griffin III when he played in the NFL. He was ahead of his time in that. If he had been in today's college football game, I think he would have been drafted number 10 or top 10 pick overall without question. I mean, he might have been a better quarterback prospect than Caleb Williams. I'm not saying that's the case, but Charlie Ward was just ahead of his time. He ended up getting drafted by the New York Knicks and played at least a decade or so in the NBA. So, yeah, that is definitely a big transition. Another transition that happened from one sport to the other was Tony Gonzalez. Tony Gonzalez played basketball and football at the University of Cal. He was on a team that made a deep run into March Madness, but he spent a Hall of Fame career in the NFL as one of the greatest tight ends to ever play the game. So, and listen, we can talk about all these two-sport athletes. We can talk about Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders, Michael Jordan doing all that. We can talk about all the two-sport athletes, but we're talking about a transition from football to basketball. And it's so hard to see that in the professional level because their seasons coexist with each other. So I can't see an NBA player spending an offseason playing the first few weeks on an NFL team. I can't see a football player realizing that my chances of making playoffs are not that good, or I might make the playoffs this year, but I also have an NBA season to consider. I can't see him going to play in the NBA. I mean, the hardest part for me is I think Austin Rivers is trying to say something in his opinion, but I think he overvalued the circumstances. I think he overvalued the numbers of NBA players that could go in the NBA. Like, there is no way you can find 30 guys in the NBA and put them on a football field. Where are they going to play? What are they going to do? You know, you're basically wasting roster spots for them. Now, I think football players, and this might be me, but there are some football players that could adjust to the NBA. Of course, in basketball, you have more athleticism. You have more freedom for creativity, whereas football, you kind of are limited in what you can do because all you're trying to do is get down the field and score a touchdown, and you can't afford to make costly mistakes, whereas in basketball, you can take a little more risk because there's a lot more freedom there. But in football, you kind of have your role players, you guys that know the roles. The quarterback throws the ball, the running back runs, the receiver catches, you have the offensive lineman that blocks, the defenders tackle, and the special teams work on pinning the ball deep in the opponent's territory or putting up 3 points for that matter. Like, there's a little more structure in football, but that does not mean that basketball players can do that. You cannot tell me that even Draymond Green, who I saw a video of him practicing, playing for Michigan State's spring game, because he was a Michigan State player. You can't tell me Draymond Green would be able to get past the offensive line and tackle Patrick Mahomes. You can't tell me that somebody like Steph Curry would be able to outrun a top cornerback to catch a touchdown pass. You can't tell me that even LeBron James could make a catch and get hit by Ray Lewis. Because trust me, LeBron James would be whining and crying because, oh, he got hit, he got so terrible. And that goes all the way back to Emmanuel Acho's comment that football players, the contact is just more severe in football than there is in basketball. You can't even play a game in the NBA, in my opinion, if you got banged up playing football as well. So, unfortunately for Austin Rivers, he completely missed a mark. He completely missed a mark here. I think he was trying to say something to gather some attention, to draw some controversy, and to make a point that he thinks is on his mind. Because, trust me, he is getting a lot of flack. And one particular person that is giving him more flack than anyone is James Jones. Now, James Jones was a former NFL wide receiver who you may remember for the Green Bay Packers when he won a Super Bowl with them back in 2010. Anyways, he was on the show with Emmanuel Acho, and like so many people, he responded to the comments made by Austin Rivers. And let's just say he was totally anti-Austin Rivers, what he said there. And this is what he said the first time when he was talking about the comments that Austin Rivers made.
Let's get this straight. Number one, they put in a flop rule in the NBA because you guys are soft.
Oh, no. Oh, God. See, now you guys started.
You guys started a trend of rest games. That's what y'all started. And now y'all want extra votes and all that type of stuff to win the MVP because you only play 22 games out of 82. Y'all started that, so y'all all sorry. Number two, you said 30 dudes. If you would have said one dude, maybe Anthony Edwards could play safety or something, I'd have listened to you or something like that. You said 30 dudes. No. Number one, put respect on our sport. That's number one. It is not just run and catch the ball and turn around. It ain't just hand the ball off and do that. It takes a lot of work at your craft to do what we do on the football field. And Austin Rivers, if you stepped on the football field, homeboy, you wouldn't make it. We know that right now because you barely made it in the NBA. And I'm just keeping it a buck. Football is not an easy game, dog. That's why a lot of football players, basketball players that stepped on the football field, step right back on the basketball court because it's not an easy game. It's a lot that goes into the NFL. And you're not about to walk into the NFL and think you're just about to catch and turn around. Try again, homeboy. Do your research on the NFL, man. Watch some football games, old games, new games, whatever you want to watch, and catch up on it, man, because 30 dudes in the NFL and the NBA ain't doing that, homeboy.
So James Jones gave his thoughts. Basically, that football and basketball were the different game. And I totally agree with that. I mean, there's obviously, it might look simple with football, but there's a lot more that goes into the NFL. And it's hard to see why, NBA players can make the transition overwards. But Austin Rivers, he hasn't really taken the criticism so well. Like, he hasn't really been accepting of people's responses, opinions about him. And that is why later on, when he heard about the comments from James Jones, he tweeted out his response. He said, "Been just sitting back, listening to the chatter, but I can't help myself sometimes. LOL. James Jones, the Packer guy, I have never heard of you. But listen here, you little meathead. Fall back, LOL. Talking about you barely made it to the NBA. Bro, I was a lottery pick who has already played 11 years. You played 8 to 9 seasons in the NFL. Make it make sense. By your own logic, you barely made it. You sound salty. Beat it." So, typical response from someone that does not appear to be accepting of anyone's criticism or public opinions for that matter. But you can only imagine what James Jones would have said, and I'm sure he probably wouldn't have wanted to respond to that opinion, but this left him with no choice. And folks, I got to tell you what, I will admit I never heard of James Jones, or I probably heard of him, but I never considered him like a top-tier wide receiver in the game. I mean, if you asked me, I would have known more about Austin Rivers more than James Jones, but I have more respect for James Jones after his response, because trust me, folks, this is without question a perfect response to someone that went right after him wondering who he was. And I think all of America and all of the world should know James Jones' name by now, even if they don't watch the show that he was on. So this is what James Jones said, and I'll tell you what, I just can't get enough of it, the response.
All right, homeboy. Since I'm a meathead, I'm gonna stick with my homeboy, man, because we on TV. All right. I see 11 seasons. 7 different teams. Top 10 pick. I see averaging 9 points a game over your career. 2 rebounds, 2 assists over your career. Top 10 pick. You know what that sound like to me? In the streets, we call you a bust, homeboy. That's what that sound like. Now, if my daddy played in the NBA and I was coming out of the draft, I'd probably be a top 10 pick too, homeboy. But once I get into the league, I'd have handled my business. Now, I led the league in touchdowns. I won a Super Bowl in the highest league. You did none of that. You don't got no all-stars. You got no nothing. Well, you're not going to have that because you got 9 points, 2 assists, 2 steals in the game, 65% free throws. So I ain't even going to keep on going back and forth with you. All I'm going to say is you 6'4", 200, maybe you should have tried football. You might have had a better career, homeboy, because basketball was not your career with what I'm reading right here. So I'm going to leave it at that. I don't go back and forth with people on Twitter, man. I ain't even really on that thing like that. So you got it, my brother.
It went from meet the graves to meet the rivers.
Ouch! Burn! Damn! James Jones, who may be or may not be the most underrated wide receiver in the Aaron Rodgers era, just fired back at the son of one of the most famous coaches, who I still to this day can't believe was actually named on the NBA All-75 as one of the top coaches in the NBA. Like, come on. Really? By way of popular choice, you pick a coach who has blown more 3-2 or 3-1 series leads in the history of NBA playoffs than anyone else, and who recently had a disaster stint as the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, when the Milwaukee Bucks were in first place in the Eastern Conference at 30-13, and then they decided, we're going to fire him, we're going to hire Doc Rivers. You sold your soul to the devil, Milwaukee. Oh, man, and Austin Rivers, I mean, listen, I know your dad's going through a lot of crap and all that, but you, on the other hand, you decided to make those comments. Congratulations. You just made the Rivers family the most clownish family in all. Now, I'm not saying you're bad people. I mean, yes, you have an opinion. Everyone's entitled to an opinion. And I will agree that basketball, there is more skills. You have to be more athletic. I might have said that earlier, but I do agree that there is more athleticism in basketball. But, my goodness gracious. A guy like you would never want to play football after you get hard so badly. You have to be physically and mentally tough, just like you are on a basketball court, but more. I mean, could I see Nikola Jokic blocking for you? Maybe setting a screen for you on the football field for you to run around? Could I see that happening? I don't know. Because as big as he is, I'm struggling to find him winning a one-on-one matchup against the likes of Vince Wilfork on the defensive end, against the greatness of J.J. Watt or Aaron Donald. Now that is a bad combination, folks. But seriously, I think it's really ridiculous that we are having a conversation of whether or not NBA players could play in the NFL. Like, there's a lot more to football. You're under a structured base, whereas you're not so much in the NBA. NBA players are so selfish and so spoiled these days. That's why we have all these players sitting out just to rest. They're trying to accumulate more. That's why the NBA is so different, and it is so sad. And I know my co-host of my other podcast, Mark T. Robinson, would say that he loves the NBA, but there are some elements that he doesn't like about it. And he's an old head like I am, even though I'm currently 33, and he's like, what, in his 30s? Yeah, he's getting there, or at least he's there at the moment. But seriously, it's a real tragedy when you have a bunch of NBA players basically speaking out saying, oh, we can do this, we can do that. Like, let's see if Draymond Green can handle the defense of the Baltimore Ravens. Let's see if we can have, who's a guy that I want to put on here? Let's see if we can have Russell Westbrook try to stop Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Hey, I got an idea. Let's see if James Harden wants to go toe-to-toe with C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans. I'm just saying that for personal reasons, benefits. I mean, hey, we might be able to have that happen here. Or, here's a good idea. Paul George versus the Dallas Cowboys. I know the Cowboys are in a rut, but at least they have some advantage on that. I mean, we're at a point in this life where we got a bunch of players that are acting a little spoiled. They want to stand out. They're making these ridiculous claims just for attention. And you just don't really know if they're being serious or not. Like, I mean, I think Austin Rivers is being serious. I do question the amount of players. I think there may be one or two people from the NFL that can play in the NBA or vice versa. But I'm just having a hard time seeing it. And this is, I mean, Austin Rivers has an opinion, and he has a right to feel that way, but 30 people from the NBA, if you take 30 people away from the NBA and put them in the NFL, you're not going to have an NBA. You're going to be getting players from college to try to make up the funds, and guess what? The WNBA is going to be a better league, but yeah, it's a real unfortunate situation. But having said all that, I was thinking more about this, and I decided, you know what? Let's see if I can come up with at least 5 NFL players that would make my starting lineup for the NBA. And then let's see if I can come up with 7 players from the NBA that could play in the NFL. So, folks, stay tuned. We're going to have our next discussion in just a minute. Now then, since we've given my thoughts and everyone's thoughts about Austin Rivers' comments about whether NBA players could play in the NFL and vice versa, I think it's time we give him the benefit of the doubt. I think it's safe to say, once again, basketball players have more athleticism than football players, but then again, there are some elements to the game that differ in that basketball players might not be able to adjust in the NFL and vice versa as well. But I figured, why don't we make this segment very fun? Why don't we make this a very interesting segment? How about we come up with a starting lineup for NFL players that can play in the NBA and NBA players that can play in the NFL? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be picking 5 players from the NFL who I believe deserve to be in the NBA or could start in the NBA. And then as soon as we're done with that, I'm going to be talking about the NBA players that I think will play in the NFL. And I'm going to be picking 7, as in a 7-on-7 situation, because it's going to be hard to come up with 22 names of NBA players playing on the football field, or 25 in general, because you have 11 offensive players and 11 defensive players and 3 special teamers. So with that being said, here we go with my first introduction. And, you know, folks, I think I just realized it's not really fun for me just to go talk about it with just some bland, boring silence, for that matter. Like, I need something to kind of get us interchanged, get us charged up, get us fired up. And I think I know a perfect way to do that. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring a familiar starting lineup music that we all know and love as I introduce to you the NFL's starting 5. And now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, here is the starting lineup for the NFL players who I believe will be playing in the NBA starting lineup. Starting at point guard, he's currently the quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. He is Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, who averaged 26 career points in his high school, which is second in program history. He averaged 20 points per game in his senior season, sharing the Division II Southeast District Player of the Year. At shooting guard, he's currently the quarterback of the Houston Texans, C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud was a 2-sport athlete down in California. He allegedly scored 40 points on Jaime Jaquez of the Miami Heat in high school, and in the Celebrity All-Star Game, he scored 37 points. And I've seen clips of him hooping, and I truly believe he will be an NBA player. At starting forward, or small forward for that matter, it's Micah Parsons. Need I say, he was the MVP of the Celebrity All-Star Game. And with his trash talking, the dynamic between him and C.J. Stroud in the offseason, I think that would be a great dynamic duo on the basketball court. At power forward, a 6'5", 248-pounder, he scored 1,890 points in high school. It is T.J. Hawkinson from the Minnesota Vikings, who would be a very strong, efficient power forward from the Minnesota Vikings perspective, or for this team's perspective, a guy that can defend, a guy that can score, and do all of that when setting up the offense as well. And finally, at center, we have DeForest Buckner from the San Francisco 49ers, 6'7". He was the Gatorade Basketball Player of the Year in Hawaii, and he averaged 12.8 points and 10.1 rebounds as a senior at Honolulu High School in Hawaii. And folks, I might have mispronounced that high school name. I apologize to you lovely people down in Hawaii who are listening to this. But that, of course, is my starting 5 for the NBA or NFL to NBA starting 5. Joe Burrow, C.J. Stroud, Micah Parsons, T.J. Hawkinson, and DeForest Buckner. And I got to tell you what, I think I have complete confidence in this team that can go up against any other of your teams as well. But let me know who you guys think is deserving to be in the starting 5 for your NFL to NBA segment. And now that we've gotten our 5 NFL players in my starting lineup, let's go ahead and think about my 7 NBA players who would be perfect for my 7-on-7 NFL team. Now, folks, this is a very tough call because I think, as I said, basketball being more athletic, it could really be a tough decision because you can have guys that can play multiple positions, whether it's on offense, whether it's on defense, and all of that. But, folks, I think it's going to be a real great, interesting challenge for me to come up with this. And I took some time to think about it. Fortunately, I think I got my 7. You can correct me, you can criticize me, you can tell me, oh, your team sucks, my team's going to kick your what, and all that. But you know what? Hey, it's my opinion, okay, people? Let's just keep it at that. So, without further ado, it's time for my starting 7 for my football team. that will be composed of 7 NBA players. At my quarterback position, this is going to be an interesting one. It is Jalen Suggs of the Orlando Magic. He was a Minnesota born and bred player. He was the first athlete in Minnesota history to be named Mr. Football and Mr. Basketball in the same season. I like his quickness and mobility around, but I also like the fact that he could step up in the clutch, so much so he had offers from Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan State, Georgia, and Alabama. So I definitely could see Jalen Suggs being my quarterback. Now for my running back, I got Anthony Edwards. I think it's safe to say Anthony Edwards is the best basketball player in the postseason right now. But he is definitely a guy that looks to have the multiple capabilities. I think he could play both a receiver and a running back, and I certainly would be expecting him to be very productive. My other running back, it's a little bit of a surprising one, but I got Russell Westbrook. Yes, Russell Westbrook, who might need to bulk up a little bit to be a running back, but he has a football IQ that is one of the reasons why he has that capability of playing on the court, much like a traditional football caliber player. And my other wide receiver may come as no surprise to you all, but I have LeBron James. Despite being the tender age of 39 years old, he's still a guy that can come up big. He can be your team captain. He, in his high school days, collected 3 receiving touchdowns, 103 catches for 2,065 yards. Yes, I know it's not quite the productive player because, as we all know, he had focus on his NBA career, but LeBron James is the All-American guy that everyone would want to have on their team, the star wide receiver. And for a guy like Jalen Suggs who needs someone to throw the ball to, you can definitely assure that LeBron James will be there. Now, for my tight end / offensive lineman, I have Zion Williamson. Listen, this guy is a beast. He can block. He can push your way through. He can make sure you don't get abused if you're the quarterback, but he can also be very productive. He can catch passes and pick up chunks of yards as you continue on your way with your drives. Of course, the weight issue might be a problem, but still, he's a fearsome player to be reckoned with. Then I have 2 offensive linemen who can also play defense if I allowed it. Number 1 is Julius Randle for the New York Knicks. The size of the man is just unbelievable. A force down low in the paint in basketball. He is a threat. He is a monster. And this guy can block and make sure that Suggs cannot take any hits. And then finally, my other offensive lineman is Andre Drummond for the Chicago Bulls. This guy is a 7'6" wingspan at 6'11" and 280 pounds. And that is how I see my 7-on-7 NFL team. Jalen Suggs at quarterback, Anthony Edwards at running back, Russell Westbrook at running back, wide receiver LeBron James, tight end Zion Williamson, and my offensive linemen of Julius Randle and Andre Drummond. And folks, you can call me crazy. You can say that the only team that we might have a chance to beat are, in fact, the Carolina Panthers, though they did get better this year. But at the end of the day, this is the guys that I think would be perfect for my NFL 7-on-7 segment. So what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. And when we come back, we're going to wrap up the show with my final thoughts on the matter.